teens. I am Lucha Cougar. And I know what you are thinking. Oh, what a wonderful day to wake up and check in on Mr. Sargent's class and see what Mr. Sargent is teaching. Well, I've had enough. He's always talking about how nice his hair is. I'm going to cut his hair off. He's always saying, oh, do you like my tie? Don't you think if you liked his tie, you would tell him you liked his tie instead of him having to ask for it? What arrogance! I saw him walking and I snuck up behind him and I grabbed him and I put him in a headlock. And then you know what I did? I took my hand and I messed up his hair. And I even took the clip out of his hair and threw it onto the ground. Well, I've had enough. Mr. Sargent could never teach you today's lesson. Because today's lesson with absolute values, it has two answers. And Mr. Sargent isn't enough for two answers. For two answers, you need Lucha Cougar. So let me tell you what you should do first. Mr. Sargent taught you all about it. Absolute values. Ooh, big whoop. It's always positive. Anyone can teach you that. But Lucha Cougar is here to teach you how to solve an absolute value equation. Two answers. You're going to start by isolating the absolute values. We can do this by subtracting 4 from both sides. When we subtract 4 from both sides, this leaves us with the absolute value of x plus 3 is equal to 11. Notice now that the absolute value is isolated. There are no other values near the absolute value. So now we are going to solve twice. We're going to write, we are going to write x plus 3 equals, and we're going to write x plus 3 equals. Now to solve this twice, we're going to solve for a positive 11 and a negative 11. So here I write positive 11, and here I write negative 11. And now I use inverse operations to isolate each variable. I subtract 3 from both sides. 11 minus 3 is 8. And here we subtract 3 from both sides. And here, negative 11 minus 3 gives you negative 14. And there are your two answers, x equals 8 and x equals negative 14. Let's try another. Your next problem shall say the absolute value of x minus 5 minus 6 is equal to 7. The directions say isolate the absolute value. We do this by adding 6 to both sides. And this leaves us with the absolute value of x minus 5 is equal to 13. Notice now that the absolute value has been isolated. There are no other values around the absolute value. So now we solve it twice. X minus 5 equals, x minus 5 equals, and we're going to set it equal to a positive 13 and a negative 13. So there it is, positive 13 and negative 13. And now we use inverse operations to isolate the variable. We add 5 to both sides, giving us x equals 18. And now for our second answer, we add 5 to both sides. And negative 13 plus 5 gives us negative 8. And there are your two answers. Too many for Mr. Sargent, but just the right amount for Lucha Cougar. And now for a problem that Mr. Sargent could never handle, because this problem has a coefficient. Notice that this problem is being multiplied by a coefficient of 4. there's a 4 out in front of these absolute values that is a coefficient. You must use inverse operations to isolate the absolute value. So the opposite of multiply is divide. You divide both sides by 4, and this leaves you with the absolute value of x plus 2 is equal to 3. Once again, we have isolated the absolute value, so we will now solve twice. X plus 2 equals, and x plus 2 equals. We will set this equal to a positive 3 and a negative 3. Positive 3, negative 3. We use inverse operations to isolate the variable. We subtract 2 from both sides. Any little brothers or little sisters home, just ask them, what's 3 minus 2? And they will tell you, 1. Ha! And here, we subtract 2 from both sides. And x equals negative 3 minus 2, negative 5. And there you have it. Accompanied by this video is a Google form for you to complete. And the instruction of Lucha Kuga is so good that you will get a perfect score on this form, because as if Mr. Sargent were teaching it, who knows how you would do. But you've got the best instruction today. Make sure you tune in next week to see if Mr. Sargent is back or if Lucha Kuga has returned.